This is FLOSS Weekly. I'm Doc Searls. This week, Shawn Powers and Jonathan Bennett join me in a roundtable on Linux kernel security and beyond, meaning way beyond. A whole lot of topics got covered. Some of them gloomy but interesting, some of them upbeat and also interesting. It's been a fun show. Us three guys, that's coming up next.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is FLOSS Weekly episode 642, recorded Wednesday, August 11th, 2021. Linux kernel security and beyond. Hello again and good day or evening or whatever it is wherever you are. I am Doc Searls and this is FLOSS Weekly. I am joined this week in a round table, even though it looks like rectangles on my screen, by by Jonathan Bennett and Shawn Powers. Thanks to a scheduling oddity, we don't have a guest this week, so we are guests of each other. And we'll get into the show quickly because we got off to a late start. But first, I have to let you know about Club TWiT. Club TWiT's a new thing. All the shows there are ad-free, and it only costs $7 a month. And that gets you not only all the shows, but lots of pre-show and post-show chatter, stuff you're not going to hear, like a lot of the stuff we just talked about that was really interesting that I'm not going to let you know because you're not in Club TWiT yet. And you have access to our Discourse server, and that includes lots of cool things, including an unofficial Linux gathering. So for all you people who are official or unofficial Linux people, that's a good place to be. So that's Club TWiT, only $7 a month. You can join now at twit.tv/clubtwit. So, and I hope that doesn't mean you club TWiT with a mallet. It means you join a new
That's
social
what Club
order.
Seal is for.
Yeah, that's a different thing.
Yeah, it's terrible. I don't think they do that anymore, but it was a fun thing while it lasted. And forgive me, my voice is not entirely with me today, but both these other guys have great microphones, so they sound great. So we actually have a fair amount of news type stuff to talk about. So I'm going to let you guys start with Jonathan, because Jonathan stuffed things into our Slack first. So, in a hurry, because wait, do we have a guest? No. Okay, let's move.
Yeah.
So what do you got, man?
I'm part of that Linux show, and so I kind of keep on top of the news each week around open source. One of the ones that I found real interesting was the Google security blog talking about Linux kernel security done right. And it was funny to see some of the different news outlets, how they covered this. One of them in particular said something about Google comes out and blasts Linux kernel security. And I read it and I'm like, no, that's not what they did. The article starts off by making the point that Linux works really, really well when it works right, but when something fails, sometimes it fails disastrously, which is kind of just how source code works. It's how computers work. But it starts out by making the point that we really should do some things to the Linux kernel, continue doing things to the kernel, so that when there's a problem, it doesn't turn into a horrendous security problem. And so to me, that means things like additional work on address layout randomization, so that it's hard to go from an overflow to jump straight in to be able to get remote code execution. And then things like starting to use Rust in the kernel instead of just C. And that's something that's coming along. But then they transition, like that's about the first 15% of the article. And then they transition into talking about something that's near and dear to my heart. And that is, hey, hardware developers, do not use a 10-year-old out-of-date kernel. Use the newest kernel. And the guy that wrote it just harps on that for about the next 75, 80% of the article. And I love it. And basically he says, do your development upstream in the open, in the kernel. And then rather than having to have 15 different engineers to move your proprietary code from kernel version to kernel version, just let them work on the upstream kernel. It'll make everybody's experience better. And I love it. I think this is great.
Sometimes you need the big guys, and because they do the most, right? And they're working the most with stuff. So a little shout out to Google for doing the right thing there. Kind of for the rest of us. Shawn?
Can I just say that it makes me feel, so when I see kernel versions right now, I feel incredibly old because it really, like the 2.6 kernel still feels like the new kid on the block to me. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just getting old, I guess.
Yes, I very much remember the 2.6 series of kernels. That was in the old days, that was a modern kernel. If you were running 2.6, you were modern. And I remember when Linus finally came out and said, we probably ought to bump that to 3. And now we're at we're getting ready to start on 5.15. Yeah, we've been doing this for a while, I guess.
What's the oldest kernel you can still run? That may be a naive question on my part, but I'm wondering if there are clocks that we have and other stuff that's even coming with your TV or something like that.
I mean, if you have old hardware, you can run pretty much as old of a kernel as you want. On modern hardware, you might be able to run a 2.4, I guess. 2.6 would for sure run.
I'm trying to think, probably embedded hardware somewhere that never intended to be upgraded, that you could probably never find the kernel version. Like, I don't know, a wall picture frame thing. Who knows what that's running?
One reason I ask is because I was in a conversation the other day with somebody about Windows and how don't dare run XP anymore, ever, anywhere on anything because it's so old and bad and likely to be attacked and everything else. It was like, I can drive an old car, but I can't drive an old Windows. I don't even know if that was true because I don't run Windows, but it suddenly made me think, I wonder if there's something similar with Linux. I didn't think so, but.
There definitely is. You don't want to run an old version of Linux that's not an up to date LTS because that's kind of the point that the Google blog was making. There's so many things that gets fixed in the Linux kernel from release to release, and not all of them get tagged with CVEs, but a lot of those fixes could potentially be turned into vulnerabilities and exploits. So yeah, if you've got an old kernel around somewhere that's exposed to the internet, you do have potential problems.
Yeah, so that's story one. so Shawn,
smooth.
Smooth. Yes, it's really this is as rough as it gets, folks. Right here. Yeah, normally we do this stuff in the back channel, but I'm looking over there. I'm thinking we have a lot of links that we put in there for the interesting things to talk about. They're too small for me to read. So.
Okay, I'll just start talking then if you want, because I like the sound of my own voice, apparently. There's a couple things that I wanted to talk about, and now that I was invited on the show, I can talk with fellow geeks about it. One, this was odd. Actually, Catherine Druckman sent this link, and I was reading it. The infrastructure bill, I'm not getting political, but the one that is in being approved or voted on or whatever right now, there's some weird stuff buried on page 2,702. Oh no, that's how long it is. It's, I don't know, some page. Anyway, about installing things in cars that breathalyzers, and it doesn't stop there. It's eye detection stuff to make sure that you're looking at the road, and when you get out of the car, make sure that you check the back seat for kids, and I mean your own kids, not random kids appearing in your car, but things that. The thing that worries me about this is not so much that, I want to leave a child in the back seat, but it's creepy how much the car is starting to snoop on you. And it's a weird thing for me to have in an infrastructure bill. I guess it's making roads safer. We fill potholes and we program robots to make sure that you're focusing on the road. How that ties in with open source is I'm a little bit worried that all of this software is going to be proprietary and all of this stuff is going to be individual to the car, which means it's going to be vulnerable. And, people are possibly going to be connecting to all these smart cars and getting information. I mean, the doomsday control the car and start driving it. We're not that far away from that. And that's pretty scary stuff. And I think that all cars should be running open source software because of that, blah, blah, blah. I digress, but it's a weird place to have stuff like that in the infrastructure bill, I think.
Yeah, we try to avoid politics here, but with open source, we do make infrastructure. I mean, that's basically what we've got here. This is a show about infrastructure in a way. And a term, by the way, a word that was hardly used outside of the military. It's like open source before like 1975. The word infrastructure is almost never used before that time, and now it's a big thing. We've got spending trillions of dollars on it. But a couple of concerns I have with that. One is, what if it all ran on Linux, but you still didn't know what it was doing? Because they're running, so the car companies own proprietary stuff on that, and they're doing it on behalf of they're doing a breathalyzer on behalf of you. There are a couple of things. One is, I think what's yours ought to be yours. Your car ought to be yours, not Toyotas or Audis or General Motors. It should be your car in the same way as your laptop and your phone should be your phone. And what's happened, I mean, when we started talking about Linux 26 years ago, whenever it was, and when Linux Journal started, that's when I did. But it's now we're 30 years of Linux in the world. It was a platform. We called it a platform. And now when you talk about the platforms, you're talking about giant walled gardens or silos. It's Facebook, Apple, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. And you're living on this platform. Or you might live on multiple platforms. And the assumption on the part of lawmakers, and again, I'm being very careful not to get political about this, but there's an assumption that's made that now, I think at this point in history, that we all live in these silos. And so let's mandate that the silos do things for us. Let's mandate that they are in charge of our lives. And I think that's a huge mistake. And I don't say that as, an arch libertarian, but rather, as anything political. I think we need a sense of what's ours. I know my pants are mine. I'm wearing them. I don't get pants as a service. It's mine. We have a sense of where our boundaries end and others begin, and we're making computing into something where we are dependent variables rather than independent ones, to get mathematical about it. And that's a bad thing. To me, what open source is about is giving us the freedom and the liberty and the control, the agency to be in charge of our own world and our own part of the world, knowing that we're still part of society, we're still part of a country or a town or whatever, and we give up some freedoms and rights in order to operate in society. But we should not be puppets. We should not be, have the suction cups of large companies on our stuff.
And I think we should know where those lines are, right? That's where the whole idea of it being open really makes a big difference. And again, I'm giving Catherine all the credit for this. I was talking to her earlier. The notion that a car is constantly monitoring you for drunkenness or whatever, that seems on the surface like a great idea, obviously, right? But what if you own a big field and you really have a hankering to get drunk and drive around in your field? And what, are the cops going to come to your field and stop you from doing that? That seems like an infringement on something. And at the very least, I want to know what my car is doing. And I worry that all of this embedded technology that is really cool and glitzy and does awesome things, if it's not open to the point where I can at least have somebody smarter than me tell me exactly what it's doing, I don't like that. I want to know what it's doing behind the scenes. And I understand that, there's proprietary technology, but that's an issue when that proprietary technology is in charge of my privacy and in charge of my daily to-dos. It really bothers me. The political part of it, I don't think that it's partisan one way or another. It's just a weird thing to have in a bill. That's what sparked the interest in it. But smart cars in general are a little creepy.
Well, it's like a lot of things in technology. We've come to the point to where we're deciding whether we want to redefine what it means to own something. When you own land or when you own an object, it's pretty much in your sovereign control, right? Like you can do whatever you want to with it. You can break it, you can take it apart, you can make it do something different. And with I think TiVoization is really when this kind of changed. Suddenly you had a device that, yes, you physically owned the device, but you were suddenly not allowed to get into it and make changes. And in fact, that is where some of the changes in the GPL3 came from, was essentially developers that worked on Linux said, look, we don't want kernel that we've worked on to be locked up in this way. And you've got kind of the same thing. It plays out a lot in software. You purchase software. Well, did you really purchase that software? Or did you purchase a license to use it? And so we're kind of in this weird transitional time where the fact that everything has become digital, and the fact that there's a bunch of lawyers that are trying to play these games with what you can and can't do, we're at a point where, as a society and as kind of a world, we're having to again make the decision: what exactly does it mean to own something? And then this question about what you can and can't do with your own car and what the law says about it, I think that's just kind of part of that discussion. What does it really mean to own your car?
I don't have a good answer. Other than to say that's a good question.
To be decided.
Yeah. And also, I really like all the cool new bells and whistles. I mean, I'm not going to lie. All of the cool features that go along with all that are awesome. So it makes it that much harder to I don't want my car to be smart, because I do. It's so cool for your car to be able to, I see you're done on this trip. Would you like to go home? Press this button and I will guide you to your house that I know where is. It's just creepy, but also so cool.
I did a blog post on what's happened with we have a new, my wife has a new Toyota hybrid Camry. It's a 2020, and it has something like 50 different symbols that you can go through in menus. And a lot of them are not obvious what they do. It has amazing stuff, rear collision warning, pedestrian detection, just all kinds of stuff. And one of the things it does, an interesting thing is that the dashboard navigation is actually pretty bad. What you get on your phone from Google Maps or Apple or with any of the others is better than what's defaulted on their screen. But one thing it does do on the screen is it leaves a little crumb trail. I can tell where I've been. Oh, I've been here before. That's interesting. That's But what you don't want to sense, and maybe they don't want you to sense it, but are the puppet strings. I had this weird experience, oh my gosh, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. We were driving through the desert in a rental car. We rented this car, and we're driving through the desert from California to Nevada somewhere. And it was right out of a car ad. Oh my God, this is a wide open road. There's nobody here. I'm going to floor this thing. It went up to 80 and then flattened out. And I called when I could. I called the car company saying, what's this about? And they said, oh no, we have a governor on there. We won't let you go over 80. And of course it's their car. It's not mine, right? You have a sense that it's your car when you're driving, but you don't, it's one of those sudden reminders that, wait a minute, we're in charge here. You're not. And that's one of those little tells that we can get. And a lot of the stuff that are the conveniences we have in our cars and in other things too. Our phones is a great example. Don't carry that little tell. So we don't really know when we're being spied on. We don't really know when we're being nudged or controlled. A lot of the way social media works is constant algorithmic nudging toward engagement, whatever engagement does. And, it just, that's stuff I like. I've seen it before. I'd like to see more of that. That's easy, but that's another kind of blurring, because we're being, you kind of know you're being played sometimes, by a good salesperson, for example, but you don't like being played by something you think is yours and you're not in control of.
Shall we pivot to something that's a little bit less political and kind of
was that political?
Less risky.
Wow, that was political. I'm in trouble.
That was about as close as we're allowed to get. Yeah, right there.
There's guys in the IRC yelling at us already. So
really,
let's talk about the Steam Deck. This is something I'm excited to see. The Steam Deck, it's the new piece of hardware coming out from Valve, and it is essentially a full PC in a handheld. It is an AMD, one of their APUs, so it's the CPU and the GPU put together, and it is going to run apparently Arch Linux with Steam on it, and they are boasting that pretty much the entirety of their library is going to work on this thing, which means that they're going to make Proton, which is it's Steam's version of Wine. So it's what lets you run Windows applications on Linux. They're apparently going to iron out all of the quirks with Proton by the time that this releases. And I think it's for one thing, that's pretty exciting because a lot of people are excited about this, and that means a lot of people are going to start gaming on Linux. But it's also interesting just to see all of the work that Valve has put into this and is continuing to put into it. I think it's pretty cool. I think it's going to get a lot of people, whether they realize it or not, into the open source ecosystem. You guys watching this?
Like watching that literally scroll up? Yes, I am right now.
Yeah, we're watching it literally scroll. So for those of you watching your radios, you're not going to see what we just did.
No, I mean,
It's
are you
cool.
watching this news story?
Yeah, so as somebody who is a Debian / Ubuntu user from all the way back, I'm like, I was a little surprised that they were using that in the first place, to be honest. It seems like a weird place to be running Debian. So, I mean, as long as they're going to maintain their code on there, that's makes perfect sense. And if Arch is the way to go, cool. I am excited about the platform itself, but I feel like we've been burned like this before, and I can't remember, but it seems like there was going to be everything was going to be Linux like years ago, and then it sort of just fizzled and never really happened. Wasn't there going to be another box or something? Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not much of a gamer, so
Steam machines. Yeah, Steam came out and said, well, we're going to start pushing these Steam machines. And it was I think they call it Steamos, and that was a repackaged Debian. I don't think Valve was actually manufacturing any of them themselves. It was all going to be through third parties. And there were a few of them that got released. They just didn't sell like hotcakes like they were hoping they would. These were essentially
didn't work, right? I mean, the library was supposed to be like every game is going to, and it didn't, right?
Yeah, that's true. Proton was not in a place where everything worked. They were, I think at that time, they were pushing for developers to actually put their games on Linux. And of course, not everybody got on that bandwagon. But there seems to be, I don't know for sure, just my feeling is that there seems to be more excitement from people about this device than there ever were the Steam machines.
Fair enough. It's hard for me to be like, oh boy, it's happening, because I'm like, hey, now, it didn't happen last time it was happening. I mean, maybe this is the year of the Linux on the desktop, right?
Linux on the handheld.
Yeah. So no, it should be cool. And the concept, I mean, it's not like it's a new concept, right? I mean, everybody loved the DS and blah, blah, blah. But then I think the Switch really made it so that, handheld and docking and work, it really made it a viable way that people consider like this is actually a gaming platform and not a gimmick. So it should be really awesome. I want it to be really awesome. I really wanted the last one to be really awesome too. So I'm skeptically hopeful. Is that a word? Is that a phrase?
Sure.
Yes, it is.
Sure. So I have to say, Proton is great. I do a lot of gaming through Proton. There's there's like two issues that really don't work in Proton. One of them is playing videos that have been encoded with the proprietary codecs, and they're working on that. They have a solution. They're just working to roll it all out. And the other thing is all of the anti-cheat devices, because they are essentially, they're designed to make sure that you're running stock Windows. And when you're running Proton, obviously you're not running stock Windows. And so there's a problem with that. Like Easy Anti-Cheat is one of the ones that a lot of games use. But there are a bunch of games that run pretty much flawlessly through Proton now. And there's a bunch of us that use it. That part of the experience is already pretty good.
Could you do me a favor? And I'm going to look like the dummy here, but I'm not a gamer. Proton, expand on Proton just a little bit for me.
Okay, sure. So you have to start with Wine, which stands for Wine is not an emulator.
So it's like better than, because there was there were other things like gaming on Linux. I mean, I used to do reviews of some of these things, and there was like competitor. I can't remember any of them. Apparently, my brain doesn't work well today.
Yeah. So
is it
Wine
the same sort of thing?
Wine is kind of the granddaddy of all of these, and then what Valve has done is they've taken and essentially they've forked Wine and they've put all of their patches into it, and that's Proton. And they are slowly pushing those patches back into upstream Wine. But Proton is essentially where they can churn the code and keep things going and fix things, and then Wine is kind of the upstream. And then gaming on Linux is the website that covers a lot of this. And then there's a couple of other programs that actually work sort of like Steam, that are launchers and let you do all the configuration. But essentially Proton is a fork of wine. It lets you run Windows programs on Linux.
Okay, cool. And obviously probably does it with a great abstracted interface, or Steam just handles it all kind of thing. That's encouraging. And since Steam has they control their library, or at least they don't. I don't know how much control they have, but they know what is going to be run through their platform and through their store and stuff, so they can actually make sure it works before it's released in the Steam store. I don't know. That's kind of interesting. I'm again hesitantly optimistic.
Yeah, go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the time will come that Microsoft itself is going to say we're going to reconcile Windows and Linux, because they did that in a way with their browser. I mean, their browser runs on whatever it is that
it's Chromium now.
Chromium. It runs in Chromium. It doesn't. It didn't roll their own with that. That moves in a Linuxy direction, I think. I'm just wondering if in the long run they'll care less and less about whatever lock-in they have with Windows and want to, And actually, what I'm thinking is it possible that in an ideal world, games are going to run better on Linux anyway? And I don't know. I'm not a gamer either. So
that's
tic-tac-toe. That's it.
That's really interesting. There are quite a few games that are old enough now that they will not run on modern Windows, but there's a decent chance that they'll run on Linux under Wine, just because it has maintained better backwards compatibility. So that is already a thing. There's another story that really ties into that you were just talking about, and it's a story. Stephen J. Von Nichols wrote it, and he started out. He says Microsoft just blew up the only reason you can't use a Linux desktop, and that is Windows 365 Cloud PC. This virtualized in the cloud Windows that you can access from anything. And I know Paul Thurrott and Mary Jo have been talking a bit about this on Windows Weekly, and there's this open question about what the purpose of Windows 11 is, and whether Microsoft is trying to kill the Windows desktop and move everybody to essentially this what would you call it, desktop as a service solution through Microsoft.
So is this a live thing now? I mean, Office 365 that includes Windows, or is this a part of the future of Windows 11? Which I know we're going off the show topics here, but I'm curious because if you're running Windows on a Linux box in a cloud, I mean, more than just remote desktop, I assume. That should be interesting.
Yeah, it's Windows 365, so it's named like Office 365, but it's a different offering. It is live. I think it's technically in beta still, so it's not like a full release, but you can get it and you can go play with it. Yeah, it's in beta, but it's pretty interesting because you can run it from a Chrome OS machine, from a Chromebook. You can run it from a Linux machine. You can run it from Windows. I think you can run it from Android or iOS even, and it's literally a Windows desktop as a service. You have your Office installed there, and apparently not all of the vendors, like Adobe's not on board yet with really pushing it, and there's maybe some licensing or technical reasons why it's not real clear yet. But yeah, this is a real thing. It's already out there, and you can play with it.
Interesting. I'll be honest, I have little reason to use Windows anymore, but that is interesting, because I'll be honest, Office 365 has made it so that you can use Office legitimately in a browser, like on a Linux desktop, and it's fascinating. Like for college kids, a lot of kids ask, "Oh, will a Chromebook work?" And at first it was like, yeah, but it's getting to be more and more viable to actually use it, because you can use literal Microsoft Office in a browser now. It's fascinating.
Yeah, you used to say software is eating the world. Well, the browser is eating all the software.
Yeah, pretty much.
Is that a good thing? I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing because the browser, my metaphor for a browser was in the first place that this is your car on the information superhighway. That's back in 1995. We talked about that. That's that was sort of like the assumption then. But it's really become something that it's a basket of cookies, and it's a basket of things that are tracking you and the rest of it, and almost everything. It's what happened to the browser is one of the reasons why all the lawmakers of the world and think that that it's their job to tell the big companies what to do. Like, you have to consent. They don't consent to you. You consent to them. Okay, that's as you go around the web everywhere, you're always consenting to everything. We've talked about this on other episodes, but that's made possible by the fact that we're all running browsers now, and we're all going to these places on browsers. I'm actually thinking that we need some new thing that's not the browser, that's zero bases an independent life.
So, like a handheld device running Arch Linux, where you could.
Yeah. This is a good pivot. Go there.
No, we just went there. Sorry, I backed up for us there.
Yeah.
Well, one of the last things we have to talk about then is the big news from Apple and CSAM. Doc, I know you know about that. You want to bring us in on that one?
Yeah. Oh boy, I didn't even know what CSAM was until a few days ago. And it would, to the hardcore privacy advocates, of which I'm one, the EFF, of course, is probably a leader there. This is just a terrible thing. Apple's decided that it's going to notice what you've got in your photo collection on your device. They'll tag it in some kind of a hash. It goes up into, when you put it in the cloud, they're looking for matches of known offensive material and child porn, basically, I guess. I don't know. That you don't want to look at this stuff to see what are they saying, but it's so easy to imagine a false positive. Also very easy to imagine a backdoor happening there. Apple has defended it pretty vigorously, calling people like me screeching something or other. I don't think we're screeching. I don't think it's easy or right for Apple on the one hand to say we're all about privacy and your device is yours when they're busy looking at stuff in your device. Even if they're saying we've got all these ways that we could say it's basically harmless. It doesn't feel that way. You've got your hand in my pocket.
That's the thing. I read a lot of it, and they say it uses all on-device processing, and it's not. It isn't. I don't think it is supposed to be like once it's in the cloud. I think it's on your local device, and built into the OS, they have all of these hashes for inappropriate things, and they say we're not looking at your stuff. Your own device is looking at your stuff and tagging it. The issue that I have is that it seems as though that is just rife for abuse. I mean, if you want somebody to get visited by the police, what do you just send them a text message with one of these pictures attached to it? All of a sudden, then it's on their phone, and is it scanned, and then the police come to your door? I don't know. I'm sure that they have scenarioed through. There's a better word than scenarioed because that's not a word, but I'm sure that they've gone through all of these, these things in board meetings with people around trying to come up with things. But it's just creepy. And if you do screech, if you do say, but what about my privacy? Then it sounds like you want to have, inappropriate material on your phone, which obviously is not the case. It's another one of those things where they're almost silencing privacy advocates by saying, why? What do you have to hide? Well, it isn't about hiding stuff. It's about, I don't want other people to be looking at, whatever I have. I mean, that's the whole notion of privacy. It feels extra creepy coming from Apple because in the past, I don't know how, several years at least, Apple has been a real privacy advocate, which just feels weird to say because, they're such a walled garden and everything is, but they have been surprisingly good in the world of privacy. And I don't know, maybe they did a poor job of explaining it, but it just seems so horrible and such a bad idea. So I don't have a great answer other than, doom and gloom like I usually bring to podcasts when I join.
You're such a doomy guy.
You're a doomy.
Why did they have to do it? And I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, there are a zillion things you can do for the good of the world. Why that? Why that when and why now? Is it because they see regulation coming down the pike and they want to sort of cut it off at the pass? Is it because of something else? I don't know. I mean,
the answer to that is, it's what could be more important than preventing, child abuse in this way. I mean, so again, if you screech and if you say anything that, against it kind of makes you sound like you're against trying to stop people from doing this, which isn't the case. So it really makes it a tough position to hold, right? I mean, to be a privacy advocate, it's a really tough position to hold when you're talking about literally saying, I don't want you to find creepy people who are passing child porn around. That's obviously we want those people to be caught. That's a horrible thing. It's just, is the juice worth the squeeze kind of thing. So, and again, I don't have a good answer for it.
I think the real danger here, and again, it is, you're right, it's super complicated because there's more at play here than just child pornography, because some of this is also tied up with human trafficking. And so, there's the potential for worse things going on than just pictures getting passed around, right? There's some terrible things that happen in the world. But at the same time, there's absolutely nothing that stops the NSA from sending a national security letter to Apple. It says, hey, we know you've got this cool technology. Insert these hashes, tell us the people that have this file, and you're not allowed to tell anybody about it ever. And that, the way the law and the courts work right now, that is absolutely a thing that the government can do. And that's terrifying, because then you're talking about you're not talking about CSAM. You're not talking about child porn. You're talking about the latest release from somebody like Snowden. You're talking about somebody pulling a file off of WikiLeaks, and that is a dangerous place to come to. And if the technology is there and the framework is there, then it's literally just one letter away.
Yeah, and the article that is in the notes here, it says, Apple will refuse the government's demands. Well, that sounds, if Apple says it, they say that, but what if they can't? Again, these are lawmakers. They put the technology there. They may not have that choice. You can refuse until you can't refuse. And that's it's a scary thing. They're building in technology that can be, And
they caved to China. They've caved to China in the past, right?
Well, that's true too.
So, they're capable of caving. And a question though is, it's easy to come up with lots and lots of examples of bad things we don't want to see happen in the world. And actually, Antonio Garcia Martinez has a piece called Hunting Predators that on his newsletter, which I get, came out on August 9th. So we'll put it in the links, but it's called Hunting Predators. And he used to, of course, he was sort of famously fired by Apple after working there for several minutes, and that was a controversy. But that was after he wrote a book called Chaos Monkeys that said a lot of things, got him in some trouble as well. But he worked for a long time for Facebook. And in that piece, he talks about all of the good that Facebook has done. Facebook has caught a lot of people, and that we're going to do bad things. And there's, again, that kind of gets back to, do we want the platforms doing our doing nothing but good, doing good for us in the world? It's, anyway, but his point is, don't get so upset. This is already going on anyway, and we really do kind of need this. But supposedly Facebook can tell when people are, a lot of people anyway, or some people might be showing signs of being suicidal, and other stuff like that. And I think within Facebook, it's a different thing. When you're in Facebook that you're in their territory and they are looking at you at all times. There's no mystery there. And you've made a conscious choice to be on Facebook. And it's not so much with your phone, though. Your phone is in your pocket. You feel it's your phone. It's not, Apple makes it. You trust it to update the software in it. You trust it to since you have to use their store that they've vetted the apps you can get there. But there's a sort of a sense of a hard boundary between where they end and you begin. And this is across the line. I mean, they crossed the line on this one. And maybe they've crossed the line on other stuff as well.
I think that's the thing that really that makes me so uncomfortable because, yes, if you're on Facebook, you're on their platform. You know, they're storing your stuff. But maybe I'm wrong, but I believe this change that Apple is talking about, or maybe just this revealing that Apple is doing now, is talking about your own device, not once the photos are in iCloud, but when you take the photo on your local device, it is going to be scanning them. As far as what I can tell from the little that I read, and if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be corrected. But that's the again, for me, that is the line. It's like, okay, I haven't done anything. I haven't put these on a site. I haven't, putting these on Apple's owned cloud. They're on my personal device now. So again, I'm just leasing the hardware that I paid for at that point. And it feels like a line to me. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's in my imagination, but it just feels like a line.
Yeah. So do people understand what a national security letter is? I mentioned that in passing, and it occurred to me that we might need to dive into just a little bit more what that is for people to understand why this is part of the problem.
It sure sounds exciting.
Sure. So a national security letter. Yeah, no, you don't want one. It's something that the Patriot Act. So right after 9/11, you had the Patriot Act, and this is something that it added to American law. And it is essentially a letter that someone like the FBI can send out that says, you are required to give us this information, and you are also gagged, legal term, unable to tell anybody about it. And so, and the oversight on this is really lacking. So essentially what it does is it allows somebody like the FBI to say, hey, let's say, for example, Google with Gmail. Hey, Google, we're interested in this person. You have to give us a copy of all of their emails or all of their emails that have this phrase in it. And you can't tell anybody about it ever. And there's nothing Google can do other than comply. Otherwise there's going to be, I think, literally people hauled off and put in jail as a result. And so what some companies have done is they've tried to get around this by they have national security letter canaries. Basically a little statement on their website that says, we have never been contacted by the U.S. government through a national security letter. The idea being, if that ever happens, they can just remove that statement from their website and hope somebody notices. I don't know if Apple has one of those canaries, but the fact that this exists and then the fact that Apple is rolling out this capability, it's a bad combination. It's terrifying.
We are pretty much doing
never gotten
this week.
One of these letters.
I've never gotten one. I can't. That's the kind of thing. Think, well, okay, I'm done. Okay, it's like I don't know. Forget it.
There have been a few businesses. There's been a few businesses.
Humans don't. Do humans get these? Done. Yeah,
I don't think. I don't think individuals.
Yeah, just companies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a happy show we've been putting on today.
Yeah, a happy show.
Let's cheer things up a bit. How about the Delta variant? How about that?
Yeah, that's
wow. So, yeah, this is depressing, but there's hope. So somebody tell me about the hope that you have.
There was one more story that somebody in Discord sent over to us, and it's a pretty interesting one. It's a open source movement comes to medical data sets, and this actually looks pretty cool. It's something that Stanford is doing, and essentially it's taking medical imaging and human doctors doing looking at the imaging and deciding whether it's a problem or not. And then taking these things, putting them together, putting it into a database and feeding it into artificial intelligence, and essentially training a model to be able to do things like detect tumors and imaging. And then instead of keeping this proprietary into themselves, they're opening up the data set and letting everybody take a look at it. And so this this platform from Stanford essentially lets any doctor anywhere upload, or you wouldn't even have to know, you wouldn't have to upload. You just have to download the data set, and then you could do local processing and let essentially artificial intelligence take a look at, an X-ray, a mammogram, whatever, and it'll give you back a result, whether according to the data set, whether it thinks that there's something here to be worried about. And that is the sort of thing that, artificial intelligence has promised these sort of results for years. And I think it's exciting, and it's very cool to see, some of these things actually materializing to where people can use it.
That is actually pretty exciting usage of AI. And in this case, even a false positive would just, you would think would bump it to, human eyes that would then look and say, oh no, that's a fingernail. Somebody dropped a fingernail. That's not a tumor. Like, good job, AI, but we see what's really going on. So that's actually pretty cool. The idea of this database and AI being open is pretty exciting too, for a number of reasons. One, it will hopefully lower the cost of medicine like this, right? I mean, if we can offload this eyeball work to an AI that might even be better than an overworked radiologist, that's pretty exciting in and of itself. The idea that it's open, that's fascinating to me too, and I like it because I think that maybe, so I joked about like, oh, let's go to happy news like the Delta variant. But when we developed the vaccine for COVID, all of the companies working together and sharing data, I mean, that was unprecedented. And it made for some amazing scientific abilities that just didn't exist when everybody's working in their own closed silos. So this is cool. I see this almost like an extension of that collaboration, but to the point where possibly AI will be able to save some lives. That's awesome. That is a great story. Whoever that was in Discord, thank you for bringing that to our attention, because that is the feel-good story that I needed today. So that's awesome.
So I'll take that even a step further. These appear to be openly downloadable for anyone. So you go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, there's nothing to worry about here. If you can get a copy of your own X-ray, you could potentially take it home and run it through this data set yourself on your own hardware and get a second medical opinion for free from an AI. We are in the future.
I almost made a joke about Apple scanning the image that's on my phone and giving me a false positive of doing something shady, but I'm not going back to that dark part of our podcast here. So, no, that is cool. I mean, there's probably, if we're looking for a downside there, if everybody is scanning their own X-rays at home, I mean, we can see a lot. I mean, this is like people going to WebMD and deciding that they have cancer, right? I mean, we could see a lot of doctors whose patients said, I scanned this with the super duper AI, and it said that there is a 0.1% chance that this fuzzy part of the image is cancer, so I need to be seen right away. I mean, I could see that happening, but even that is better than just missing things because somebody can't afford the wait, or because there's, like I said, that overworked radiologist who's living on coffee just trying to get through a big stack of X-rays. So I think ultimately this is for the good, even if there's some frustrations that come with it. I mean, take the good, you take the bad, take them both, and there you have. Nobody. Yeah. Am I that old? The Facts of Life theme song. Thank you, Aunt Pruitt. The Facts of Life. I appreciate that, buddy.
It should belong to us, including. Am I inaudible? Did I disappear?
You're good. Go ahead.
I hear you.
Okay, there was a little mic issue there. I think all medical records ought to belong to us, including all that film, as it were. All those X-rays. But this actually is a chance to pivot to a question for you two guys about, because this kind of brings it up. We should have AIs of our own, don't you think? And what things would you want to apply your own AI to? My preference is like, let's just start with calendar and health and financial. I mean, where have I been spending my money? Where did I spend too much money? Where, if I have all my receipts, what are the patterns that I see here? That not because I want to, some advertiser wants to reach me, but rather because I want to know what I've been doing. I just think there's a lot of AI we could use in our own lives if the AI belongs to us.
Yeah, I think world domination is really what I want to focus on.
You're the one. You're the guy.
With my AI. No.
Yeah. There's always one.
Yeah, I think that without thinking of it as AI, I think that it's going to be included in more and more of our apps. And I mean, our phones are a prime example of, I don't know that it counts as AI, but the simple thing like documentation calendaring and notifications, offloading that from my things I need to be focused on has given me, sadly, the ability to work more, which was never the intent, I think, of computers saving us all this time. But yeah, I think that AI, while I know there's lots of scary doom and gloom stuff, but we're done with that part of the show. I think that it's going to allow us to use our gelatin in our skull to focus on less mundane things. I think, okay, my answer is then I want AI to do the mundane things in my life so that I can use my brain for creativity. I can use my brain for problem solving. I can focus less on, paying my cable bill and things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're kind of in the same place. You've got a lot of these AI things are already a part of Google services and Apple services, right? So like Google Maps, you say, hey, I'm here. I want to go there 3 states away. And within less than a second, most of the time, Google says, all right, here's the exact route you need to take. And here's how long it'll take you. Here's all the tolls along the way. And, you can start driving and then say, hey, I feel like coffee. And Google will say, hey, well, here's the nearest coffee place. It's only a minute off of your route. Right. So there are already all of these either pseudo AI or artificial intelligence things that we interact with. But you have to then think, well, in each of those, it's a free service, which means that I'm not really the customer. I'm the product. Right. That's the whole thing about these free services. But if you have a GPU, which I think almost everybody has a video card of some sort, then there are open source projects where you can go and run your own data set and do AI stuff. But then you have the much higher barrier to entry to get into it. And so there then becomes this question of, all right, how much am I willing to give away? Essentially, how much of my data, how much of my eyeball time in advertising am I willing to give away to Apple, Apple or Google, whoever is doing it, Microsoft with Bing even. How much of this am I willing to give away in order to get these really slick and nicely packaged together artificial intelligence enabled applications? And that's a different answer for everybody.
And it's biased. Look, you mentioned the coffee, right? You're driving along on your way via GPS and you say you want coffee. I bet that it takes you to a coffee shop that has advertised with the platform as opposed to mom and pop's coffee shop that may have better, cheaper coffee. So yeah, you do sell a little bit of your soul when you use these things. But like you said, they're not. It's not your AI then, right? You are the product. And if you're willing to do that, yeah, and obviously I am. I want coffee and I want them to find it for me, and I don't want to drive around for 20 minutes looking. So there's that. But I think the idea of having AI that we can trust or that we control, or that I don't want to say has our best interest in mind, because that makes it seem a little bit too sentient for my comfort. But that isn't looking out for somebody else's bottom line. Yeah, that would be cool. And maybe we'll get that. Maybe that is on the horizon. I don't know. It's not in my GPU because I don't know how to do that. I mean, the things you said, I have a GPU. I wouldn't begin to know what to do to make it do something good for me, other than make my little man on the screen go quicker. That's about all I can do with the GPU.
I am willing to bet that within 20 years, targeted advertising as we know it right now is going to be obsolete. I mean, the idea that a bunch of AI could be done in my life in some way that is going to give me a better ad rather than just what I actually want I think once we work out better signaling between demand and supply, that's safe, we can have a much more efficient marketplace. And so that's what I'm working toward, what I'm hoping for. We managed to soak up most of an hour. There's one more topic that Jonathan stuck in our back channel here, with a very, very box office title, Improving Latency with Active Queue Management, AQM During COVID-19. But one of the authors is Jason Livingood, he's a high-up guy at Comcast. And it's all about bufferbloat. We've talked about bufferbloat before on the show. We had Dave Tadd on here, who's part of the cabal that's working on that. And I want to point out that there's a really good site that I was told about called fast.com, FAST.com. And that you just go there and it measures your speed. But if you go into settings and you turn on all the stuff in there, you can see the buffer bloat in upstream, in what happens in what's called loaded upstream. And I've been running that, and we are new here we didn't go through the where are you thing at the beginning of the show. And all three of us now are in flyover states. I might want to add, I'm in Indiana now. I'm now south instead of east of Shawn, and still east of Jonathan. But we have a new Comcast connection here, and it's like 400 down and 40 up, but there's no buffer bloat. And so hats off to Jason and to Comcast for what they're doing so far with that. It's very easy to crap on cable companies especially, but it's a good connection. And I'm on Wi-Fi here. I'm not on Ethernet because I could not find a way to snake Ethernet down to the basement where I'm talking from, at least not yet. So, but the Wi-Fi is working really well.
Doc, I'll have to come visit, John, and bring my. I'll have to come visit. I'll bring my tools and I'll pull you some Ethernet when I come. It'll be fun.
Okay. Well, I have to clear it with the landlady first, but if you could do it, I almost did
Just
it.
Do it well
through the floor. I mean, there's actually the air return for the HVAC goes. I thought it went down into the basement, but it's actually between floorboards, and there's Smurf tubing that runs out of there. I was going to dig into the Smurf tubing, run it to the blue box that's on the ceiling I've opened up here, and get it into that. That was my next thing, but. Anyway, close enough. But bring your Starlink with you too. That'd be fun.
Okay. Shawn?
So I was just going to say, I was a last minute add to the show, and so I forgot. I'm still. I don't know if I've talked about it in this show or not. I seem to be on a lot of shows, but I am currently moving from 50 terabytes in the Google Cloud to moving that 50 terabytes to my local Synology box, and I forgot to stop that download. It's been going for about a week now. And you can still see my video. I think I'm actually clear and visible and everything. Yeah. One of the issues that with buffer bloat is that the faster connection you have, the more CPU it takes to do that quality of service, right? But there's also the nice thing that if you can just limit the programs that are trying to fill the pipe, it still works. Like right now, I just have a limit on it. I have a 400 megabit connection, and I said, okay, rclone, the program I'm using, you're only allowed to use 350 megabits, and it keeps in that little box, and I still have enough bandwidth that everything seems to work really well. I mean, normally I would shut it off, but I mean, literally it was last minute. I forgot to do that, and I just realized it because you brought up the buffer bloat thing. But even if you don't have a super fancy router, faster connections actually kind of make a difference. I'm super impressed with this. It's just a standard residential cable modem that I'm on. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's encouraging to see Comcast, one of the big players, getting into this and actually trying to fix it. I think that's really cool. And I think Dave Tatt and all of his guys should, and I know they are because I'm on one of their mailing lists, but really should feel good about having made the world a little bit better place through that.
Awesome.
So we actually managed to soak up an hour here, and it's almost pointless to ask the final four questions. I just want to say that we actually did not mention blockchain during the entire show. So blockchain
that's my day job. So me being here, here. Yeah. My day job, I work on Filecoin rigs. All data centers all over the west part of the country. So just my presence here. That's our blockchain.
You are the living embodiment of blockchain. Well, it's been great having the show, and I think Steve Gilmore says that on his old Gilmore Gang podcast that thanks everybody who showed up and especially those who didn't, and so we could apply that any way we want. Anyhow, so our scheduled guest will be on. I just got a note from him that distracted me for a bit, so we'll make that work out. So thanks, guys, for making it happen.
Do you get plugs? Can I plug something?
Yeah, go do your plugs. Do your plugs.
Okay. My plug is just for my webcomic. Doggone it. I am still loving my webcomic, so please check out My Big Round World, and you'll see my terrible drawing and my sometimes witty banter. But, yeah, and I got, there will be plushies. I don't know if we can go back.
I was going to say you have to plug your spot. There's a plushie. You actually have it sitting in your background. It's not
available yet. This is the prototype. This is the only one in the world that exists. But it's one of my characters. So
there you go.
That's all I got.
Did you sandbox that when you were making it? Put it in a real sandbox. And you, Jonathan, what's up?
I will plug hackaday.com. Do the security column over there. It goes live every Friday morning. So make sure to check that out. And then I will also jump on the Club TWiT bandwagon and tell you that everybody that listens to the shows and enjoys it ought to go get on Club TWiT, get on the Discord, and join us for the Linux show. If we get enough people that really jump on board with that, maybe we can do something more interesting with it. So those are my two.
Maybe you could have one of Shawn's plushies as a promotional thing.
Go.
There you go. Well, thank you, everybody. This has been this has been a show. and next week, who do we have on next week? I should check. I never do, but I should. Let's see. I have to scroll down all the way and.
Clyde Searspad from the Linux Foundation.
Searspad. Okay, very good. Okay, yeah. So we have Clyde coming up next week. So that's the Linux Foundation is always changing, always cool, and always interesting to have somebody on from there. So,
and if the schedules get mixed up, I'll see you again next week.
Yeah, and if there's another schedule mix up, then we'll pull the team together again and try to talk about cheerful stuff. So it all has a happy ending. Okay, thanks, guys. We'll see everybody next week.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that podcast episode. If you would like to check out more about tech news, then you should check out Tech News Weekly with me, Micah Sargent, my co-host Jason Howell, where we interview the people making and breaking the tech news every week.